Welcome to the Creator Spotlight here on the Spotlight on Fightful. I am Steven Jensen, joined as always by Jeremy Lambert. And our guest today is a returning guest. He is a voice of my childhood and Jeremy's childhood. I'm sure you all know him from WCW and TNA Wrestling. You may even know him from XWF. And he has a book that just released, Sitting Ringside Volume 2. He is the legendary ring announcer, Dave Penzer. Dave, thanks for joining us again. And how have you been doing?
I've been doing great. Thanks for having me, man. But I feel old. The voice of your childhood. Oh my God.
Yeah, man. I mean, me and Jeremy are both in our mid to late 30s. We're kind of becoming the old heads of kind of our space, and like kind of the wrestling podcasting scene also. And yeah, we grew up on you, man. I was a kid in the 90s, and so was Jeremy. And I was a big WCW fan, especially. So and I love TNA, early TNA. Still follow the product. So no, I'm not just blowing smoke. You legitimately are somebody we both grew up on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to have you on today because your book just came out, Sitting Ringside Volume 2. Obviously there was good feedback and reception for the first book. For you all to be doing this again, of course, you are the co-author along with Guy Evans, and I saw it was forwarded as well by Mike Tenay. Can you tell us kind of about the decision making of doing this book, kind of based on what you got, from coming out with the first book?
Yeah, we were just going to do one book. That was the original plan. It was going to be a scrapbook. It wasn't even going to be like about, my career. But the more that I started talking to Guy Evans, he came to me and said, all right, we're doing two books and it's going to be more, with along with all the cool inside, never before seen, inside baseball formats and stuff, business plans. We're going to, tell more of your story than we were planning on it. And I said, all right, you're the boss. So here we are.
Guy sent us a excerpt of the book, and part of what I was reading had to do with the XWF. And I kind of want to start off today's interview talking about that, because that's a promotion that today's wrestling fans might not know really much about, but for someone like me and Jeremy, once again, with the age we were at, our fandom, and like the internet age and everything kind of all coming all together at the same time. Like, I remember the XWF. I remember this happening, and I remember there being like DVDs and stuff, like maybe a DVD set for the company, and it was almost like this like lore, or like this thing that was like it's hard to paint a picture for this, because this is like ECW is closed, WCW is closed, WWE is kind of the only big game in town, and XWF had a lot of the talent that I was familiar with from WCW and stuff like that. So can you tell us a little bit about just like XWF and like the kind of just the idea and concept even like becoming a thing back then?
Well, yeah, Turner went out of WCW went out of business, and there was only one player in the game, and that was WWF at the time, Vince McMahon and company. And so a lot of people were trying to get a lot of different things going. Obviously, there was a ton of people that needed work, and there were, there was only one wrestling company, which never really before happened in the history of the sport. Back in the territory days, everybody had their own territory, but there was more than one place to work, and then there was no, you got to keep in mind that back then there was no indie promotions that booked 1,000-seat ballrooms in Chicago and flew in 10, 12 guys. If you were, I'd say, see, just for where I lived at the time in the Atlanta area, if you want to book an indie show, number two, and maybe a Buff Bagwell or a Disco Inferno, and that's it. And then just fill it out with undercard guys. So it's a whole different kind of thought process as the world we live in now. And for whatever reason, of all people, Brian Knobs and Greg Valentine and Jimmy Hart got there first, as far as at least having somebody put up the money to be able to, tape some pilots and see where we went.
Well, I know a big part of that too was like the early involvement of Hulk Hogan, and I also believe Randy Savage was like at one point linked to that. Like it was like, you know, massive names and stars. Can you kind of speak to, you know, I know this a lot of stuff's going to be in your book, of course, but like, can you speak to like kind of what it was like during the early days of almost like negotiating the idea of the company? Because Hulk Hogan, it sounds like back then kind of had like one foot in, one foot out. And obviously that's like a really big key to this whole thing being a thing would be Hulk Hogan's involvement. So what was it kind of like the early days of like trying to put this whole thing together and specifically having Hulk Hogan potentially being involved?
Yeah, a lot of guys flirted with the promotion. The ones who went all in, I'll tell you from the very get go, were Roddy Piper and Tony Schiavone and Jerry Lawler, which is a whole different side story. Although they did do the tapings, Lawler had gotten a little inside baseball. Lawler had gotten offered his job back in WWF the day before the tapings were scheduled. He took the job, but he said he had to do the tapings because he was contractually obligated, which he was. And so that was the beginning of Vince's saying, all right, how many people could I purge from this promotion before they could get it on TV and screw their chances of getting a deal? And it's not all Vince's fault, by the way, or WWE's fault, but that's just a little bit. Guys like Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan were a little bit more hesitant. Even like Hall and Nash came by a couple of times to the office. They were a little bit more hesitant to risk their name and their legacy on this promotion that nobody really knew if it had a chance. And so I know before I was brought in, Randy Savage flirted around with it. He stepped away right before I was brought in, and they decided to that they were going to do this and they were going to hire full-time staff and all that. And Hulk flirted with back and forth. It was funny. I used to in the boardroom there was a board, a whiteboard, and I was the one who would write down like people's ideas or what matches or storylines. And there was always one side if Hulk decides to do it, and the other side if Hulk doesn't decide to do it. And like one day it was, Knobs would come in and said, "Hey man, I hung out with Hulk last night. I think I got him, convinced him to do it." And then, a couple days later, it'd be like, it doesn't look good. He was a big fan of not only the promotion and the idea, but, the people behind it. Jimmy Hart to this day still, acts sort of as his road manager. Knobs and him, I don't know. I think they're back on good terms, but they were very good friends at the time. Nobody really likes Greg Valentine, but, you put up with him. That's a joke, by the way, kind of. And I got off track. Sorry about that. So what he ended up doing at the end of the day was he kind of did in between. He said he would do a match, but that we couldn't post it. We couldn't include it in the TV tapings. We were shopping to the television networks, and he said he would do a promo that we could use in the shows we were shopping to the TV network. So he didn't go all in. He didn't go all out, but it wasn't until we were at Universal Studios that he decided he would do a match against Curt Hennig. That would be sort of like a dark match that we could film, but we couldn't use unless we got to a point down the road where we got on TV and negotiated the ability to use that match. So it's sort of an interesting time in the business. And, there were some people who were sitting at home making, millions of dollars of Turner's money. There were some people who were not making any money. And, there were some people who had saved their money, like a Hogan or a Savage, and, or a Sting or someone like that. So there was a lot of people that really needed the work, and there were some people that really didn't want to risk their reputations, and Hulk kind of flirted with it, back and forth the whole way through.
What was the overall kind of vibe in the locker room and at the tapings specifically? Because for those that don't know, I know Jensen mentioned a lot of the names that were part of it, and you've mentioned a lot of the names, a lot of the former kind of top guys in WCW, a lot of ECW people, but also guys who have come on to be big names. I'm specifically going to mention AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels were part of these tapings as well. So it was a really good mix of, again, people who had been on television at WCW, had a whole lot of experience, people who may have been on television at some point with ECW, but then guys who maybe didn't have as much experience. So what was just kind of the vibe overall in that locker room?
It was great. Everybody was just happy to be working for the most part. It was very much family atmosphere because there wasn't anything else unless you wanted to go to New York, and he wasn't exactly hiring, a million people. He had just bought the contracts of a whole bunch of wrestlers that he was trying to figure out what to do with. So it was everybody worked together and let's make this thing happen kind of attitude, and everybody everybody pick somebody up, and if work hard to get this thing going. It was fun. It was sort of like TNA is now, or it was great. I booked the cruiserweights. I was a big fan at the time of the cruiserweights. I helped AJ Styles get his deal in WCW, where him and God, I forgot the name, but their name of their tag team was what was it, Airwave, or it was Air Paris and AJ Styles, and they were supposed to win the cruiserweight tag team titles before the company got sold. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I'm the only one who saw something in AJ Styles. I mean, Bill Behrens was his biggest supporter, and Jeff Jarrett thought the world of him, and guys like Daniels, and I just really love that style. The first Nitro about how small he was, kind of under their breath. And once he went out there and wrestled, nobody ever again said anything about his size. Fan and Knobs and them kind of put me in charge of booking the cruiserweights. I mean, I had to get approval for what we were doing, but it was pretty much my department.
That's awesome. I remember there was like a cruiserweight title battle royal for XWF. So you helped book that. It sounds like, put that together. But yeah, I believe Kid Cash won that match, and there was like a lot of names that I either knew or would come to know as a big name, all involved in that match.
Yeah, Kid Cash was a Jimmy Hart guy. Not that I didn't, think the world of his ability, and he at the time he looked like Kid Rock, who was hotter than hot. So he was a Jimmy Hart guy. But yeah, it's funny, you look back. There's everybody was on a nightly gimmick, other than people obviously that work full time in the office, like myself and Janie Engel and people like that. But there was only 3 people that were on what you would kind of call, looking back, developmental contracts, which meant that we had right of first refusal, and we were paying them a small amount per week, guarantee to be our talent. And that was Kid Cash was one. Josh Matthews was another. Who was just off of the Tough Enough series, and we had big plans for him if we were ever going to do anything, which obviously we didn't in hindsight. And then Emery Hale, who Jimmy Hart managed as Hale, and was seen as a potential rival for Hogan if we ever got anything down the road.
Yes, I remember that.
Hale. So there's a little inside baseball for you.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to cut you off there with the delay, but I was going to say that Hale, I remember it was humongous, and I remember thinking like this would be interesting to see this guy, get a big push, and maybe take on someone like Hulk Hogan. That would have been. He was a very, very large man, Hale. I was curious as far as like other pushes that you were planning to do during the company. It seemed like Vampiro was going to be a big priority, and Kurt Hennig. I know Hennig wound up going back to the WWE. He came back at the Royal Rumble in 2002 in Atlanta. And Vampiro. So am I accurate in saying that those were guys that had the company stayed around that you were going to probably be building around, were guys like Vampiro and Kurt Hennig?
Yeah, and we go into detail. We go into detail in the book about the story storylines and where things were going with all the particular players. You could go to davidpenzerbook.com, all one word, or amazon.com and check it out. You're right. Vampiro was going to get a shot at being the baby face. You could call it number one baby face. Really, the number one baby face was Piper, even though he didn't wrestle. And Kurt and Bagwell and a young guy named a young German bodybuilder were going to get a chance to be the top heel group. Bagwell started as a baby face and was teased turning heel at the end, and that's the direction we were going. But the real shows were based around the plot twist between Roddy as the commissioner and Rena Mero, a.k.a. Sable, as the CEO. And most of the storyline plots went through them. I know you've probably seen some of it. There's some of it on YouTube that you can look up. But there was a push and pull where one week it looked like Sable was going to be the heel and Piper was going to be the baby face. And then one week it looked like maybe Piper was going to, turn on Sable, but it never happened. And I don't know how far we could have taken it, but there was a long way to go. Those we did 10 hours. 5 hours of them were just like kind of squash matches. And the other 5 hours were episodic tapings. I think 3 of those are available. And the other 2 disappeared along with the 5 hours of one-off matches. And there was so much farther to go with that. They played off each other perfectly. And, you wouldn't think it, Sable and Roddy Piper, you wouldn't think it when you started it, but Roddy made magic between those 2. And you know what? Sable was able to keep up her end of the bargain. So that was really what the plot twists were about, because that's what the talent was, the top talent. And then, everything else was going to be, build these guys up, build these storylines up. And then maybe Roddy and Sable can move more towards the background once we get the new guys built up and once we got the storylines built up.
Was there anything you mentioned some of the stuff when it comes to building certain talents, but did you have anything sort of concrete out there past the initial tapings, like knowing that the future was a little bit up in the air, especially after Vince signed a couple of people away?
Well, I don't want to give away anything that we talk about in depth in the book. I've already given away a ton, but again, you get the entire XWF business plan. Nobody other than maybe 10 people have ever seen that. I didn't even know I had it, and I don't even know how I got it, because it was done before I even came into the promotion. But somehow I ended up with it, and it goes into details of how much Piper got paid at Sable and how much I got paid to work full time, and there's about the production costs and it's pretty cool detail of of something that's never been seen before. And so to answer your question, I assumed they're paying all this money. At least we got a plan B. Oh, look who's there. The big boss jumped in.
Sean Ross Sapp just sneaking in right here. Can you please comment on you being an absolute stooge and offering to give me social security numbers of all the wrestlers just if I bought you a drink? You'll notice he didn't have a comment on that.
Sean doesn't realize he's on a major delay either.
I might have said that, but he's making my delay look good. Thank you for making me look good, Sean. I might have said that in a bar in North Carolina, but I would have never given away anybody's info. But I would have taken a drink. This whole business is a work. Just because you promise something to somebody in exchange for something doesn't mean you're going to give it to them.
True.
Hey, however you can get a drink.
So getting back to your question, I don't remember, by the way, that I said that to him, but I'm not denying it either. What I will tell you is nobody's information was ever going to get passed around. It was all in good fun. But getting back to your question, you had to think there was at least a plan B, something in their back pocket. And, I don't know 100% for sure if there ever was. That fell apart. But when push came to shove and we couldn't really find anybody that wanted to jump on for a variety of reasons, we lost a lot of the talent that was on there. And B, by canceling WCW when it still had actually pretty decent ratings, versus other cable news and cable sports content and entertainment content, all the other network executives thought there must be something wrong with wrestling, TV wrestling, because why would Turner just throw away, these really good ratings? Now, maybe they're not as good as they were, but they're still in the top 10, 15 every week of cable TV ratings. And that's not easy to do. So I think that there was a stench in the air, which is one of the reasons I think that TNA had to go the pay-per-view route. I know that for a while because nobody could figure out why WCW would have gotten rid of something that was still doing okay. And we now know the answer is they didn't want it anymore, and Turner lost power, and that is what it is. But yeah, at the end of the story is, at the end of the day, whatever they had in their back pocket or wherever they thought they might be able to get on, obviously they didn't get on, or else we wouldn't be talking about this as the lost promotion.
All right, as y'all can see, a little bit different of a layout. I believe, Jeremy, we got this all set up now. We should be able to hear Dave a bit clearer. Sorry for the switch up here. Dave, as we were talking, XWF, when you guys had that company, put together and you started that up and you were looking to potentially, get distribution for that show, like, were there any front runners or anything like promising as far as like, TV deals or anything like that before you guys wound up going to DVD?
The plan was never to go to DVD. The DVD just that's actually a good question. We never brought that up in the book, so I'm not stooging anything off. But Jimmy and or Knobs found somebody who had, three of the episodes and decided to put out, the DVDs. I think they did something with Mike Graham on as far as an infomercial. But that was never the plan. The plan was not DVDs. That was just sort of how do we take the, 2 or 3 years later, how do we take this and monetize it? Since it's done. As far as TV, it was kept very close to the vest. There was the inner circle of Knobs and Jimmy, and the guy from original guy from Shark Tank, Kevin Harrington, who's started the infomercial business for the most part, or took it to the next level for sure. A couple international players. I talk about it in the book, but it's a menagerie of rich people acquired their wealth through strange and ways. It was a guy who had phone booths. He was really the head investor, and he had was in the phone booth business based out of Dallas. Hope he saved his money, actually. But looking back, but yeah, there was a guy who Sam Kennison, looking and sounding guy, who made his money through satellite porn in India. You can't make this stuff up, but he was a millionaire, so multimillionaire. So hey, however you could get it, man.
Sure.
There was an ex-executive from NFL Properties. He was an attorney, and he was really like the guy who his name was John Flood. He was really like the guy who was legit. I don't want to say the other guys weren't legitimate, but it's kind of hard to go into FX or Fox or any of the USA Network and say, hey, this is Denny. He sold porns on satellite in India, and this is Walter Frank. He sold pay phones for 40 years. It's a lot easier to say, hey, I'm the president of the company, which John Flood was, and I'm the former president of NFL Properties. I'm an attorney for the last 40 years. And so he was really the glue that kept it all together. And yeah, I mean, I never heard of anything concrete. I do know there was some syndicated offers internationally, um, but they wanted us to retape the pilots because they didn't have the people in them anymore, and it didn't make sense. They weren't offering enough money for us to go in and retape the pilots and start from scratch. That I do know for a fact, but other than that, I don't know if there ever was anything. Um, so, I always in my mind kept saying, well, and I think I mentioned this earlier, these guys aren't going to go in without at least something in their back pocket. And, I guess I was wrong, but yeah, I mean, it gave me a source of income for a year and a half and extended my time in the business. And it was really fun. I mean, I got to be a part of everything from storylines to talent booking to travel to production to even going to Arkansas uh, when we had to cut the tapes down to 41 minutes, I think, for so people could put commercials in there and and being take a slice out here, take a telling the guy that's operating the editor to take a slice out here, and we nickeled and dimed it down to 41 minutes. But so it really, I felt like I helped create something in a lot of different ways, and it was very satisfying for somebody who always wanted to strove to do more in the wrestling business than just be the ring announcer, although I love that too. And it was the first of many opportunities. Well, really, WCW Saturday Night was the first of many opportunities that Jimmy gave me, but it was the first of many opportunities, some Memphis stuff and some pay-per-views, Legends pay-per-views and stuff that Jimmy allowed me to really be a leader of the team. Uh, and that's probably the most satisfying things I ever did in the business.
That's super cool. WCW Saturday Night was the show that hooked me on pro wrestling as a kid. Like that was the first show I remember watching on a regular basis. I grew up in Atlanta, so like TBS and just I have really really fond memories of WCW Saturday Night.
Well,
Um,
we took it over when there was Nitro and Thunder, and the head honchos had their hands filled just booking those 5 hours of television. And Jimmy said, "Hey, I might want to come in with a little group of my own and do our own storylines. The major talent, if they don't want to come, don't have to come. We'll use the guys like the Benoits and the Jerkos and the Eddie Guerreros, and we'll use some of the older legends that you guys are shying away with, like from like Jim Duggan and people like that. And we'll feature the cruiserweight and um, yeah, so it was me, and I talked about this in depth in my first book, but it was Jimmy, myself, Arn Anderson, and Tony Schiavone. We booked it, and we just did a very simple formula. It was good matches, very simple storylines because you never know when Jimmy was always worried, if they don't like a storyline we do that because it interferes with something they're doing on the main shows, it's gonna, it's gonna kill us. So it was all very simple stuff that didn't involve any of the top guys or anybody that would have a problem. And just build week to week episodic television like Jimmy had done for so many years in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was some of the best times of my life. I even hired a backup ring announcer to do those shows, and so I could be backstage, a gorilla, the go position, and help with production and stuff. So yeah, it was fun. The problem was the ratings started inching up. I'll never forget. Jimmy came to me and said, "Baby, we got a problem." And I said, "What's that?" He goes, well, Thunder got a 2.7 this week. And I said, okay, what's the problem? Well, we got a 2.5. And so, then the next week we did a 2.55. And then the next week we did a 2.6. And in a couple weeks, our tapings went away to become a package show hosted by Scott Hudson, where they would take the Nitro and the Thunder tapes and interviews and sit downs, and put together a package show as opposed to telling storylines. And that was the end of that. So I guess in a way, I helped kill WCW Saturday Night. I apologize.
it was too successful. You did too good of a job, is what it sounds like.
Well, that's the point. And look,
Right.
look, not having to deal with those massive egos was a huge. I'm not saying that we could have stepped in with everything that was going on at the time and done anything. We probably would have been in the same, probably worse off than the people that were creative at the time. But we just did simple stuff with talented guys and simple stories, and people seem to dig it, So I don't want to go in and say, oh, we're a bunch of booking geniuses, because again, we just did very simple things, and tried to get you to watch from one week to the next without having to you know uh blow up the show every week with crazy storylines and cliffhangers and all that. So
What was it like? You've been around Jimmy Hart a long time, and Jimmy Hart, one, doesn't age, and two,
yep.
he's everywhere. He was just on WWE Saturday Night's Main Event this past weekend. Like he's at every single convention you go to. Like he is everywhere. What's it like just being around Jimmy Hart for as long as you have been around Jimmy Hart on a day, especially with XWF, like on a day-to-day basis? Because it seems like he doesn't slow down.
No, he's exhausting. It's exhausting. Um, no, he has so much energy and so much desire. Uh, somebody joked around on Twitter when he was on Saturday night's main event that not only was he in that shot sitting ringside, but he probably put up the ring and helped put up the merch stuff and I said, don't forget wrestling a DJ before the show went live. I mean, just wanted to help, wanted to do whatever he can to make the show better, whether it was something that other people thought was beneath him or not. He didn't care. That's what he wanted to do. Always, it's still what he wants to do. And yeah, somebody was joking about how Charles Robinson hasn't aged either, and I made a comment on Twitter at David Penzer, by the way, if you want to follow me. Um, and I mentioned on Twitter that some of the best aging talent has been Jerry Lawler, Jimmy Hart, and Charles Robinson, and the common denominator is none of them have ever done a drug or had a sip of alcohol.
That's good life lessons
So
there.
I'm not saying that's a big sample size, but maybe it might be onto something there.
I had a quick follow up about something you had mentioned with. I know you said that you like worked with Kevin from the like original Shark Tank, and you worked with the guy who looked like Sam Kennison and that kind of stuff. What was your actual like overall impression of just working with like infomercial people in general? Obviously, Don West was a big infomercial guy. He was one of my favorite wrestling personalities, and like I watched him as an infomercial guy before I watched him in wrestling. I got a lot of love for Don West. Rest in peace to him. Obviously, what were your I guess kind of your overall impression of just working with just infomercial people in general?
Well, it's funny because later on, and we talk about this in the book. Later on, I went on to be a partner of a very successful airbrush tattoo company that I sort of stumbled into, and we were extremely successful. And we developed a product called U Tattoo, where you could do airbrush tattoo to yourself. It was a little packet, and we went to the toy fair in New York City one year, and we were the talk of the toy fair. We had a ton of orders. The problem was when at the toy fair we were applying them, and so people could see the process, but they're sitting on a shelf in Spencer's Gifts. Nobody knows what it is. And it's too expensive to get like an end thing where you could actually show like video. So I actually worked with Kevin and his people again in developing infomercials for it. The problem was at the time, you could either get 2 minutes or 30 minutes, and 2 minutes was not long enough for me to for us to show it, and 30 minutes was way too long, way too expensive. We did go on HSN several times and were very successful, sold out every time on Home Shopping Network. So we came close. When it's funny, how the world works. When the Shark Tank started, I reached out to Kevin via some of his people and said, "Hey, can we get on Shark Tank?" These are people that had done the infomercial for us, produced it, so they were very aware and booked us on HSN. So, and they got back to me and they said, "Well, you don't have any sales," because we never really got sales, and then we stopped selling because it was unfortunately it was a failure. I have no doubt in my mind that if we could have gotten on Shark Tank, I'd be a multimillionaire right now. There's not a doubt in my mind. But but because we had stopped selling, they wouldn't, they wanted to know what your sales were, not just what the concept was. So we didn't get on that, but yeah, I can't complain. I've had a great life and lived my dreams. So, I guess the multi-million dollars just was meant to be. But my point is, it's a very interesting industry, and there's a lot of money to be made in the. If you notice, um, the Lori girl who sits at the end of Shark Tank is a she's a big time infomercial person, and she buys these percentage of these companies and puts it on infomercial, and makes hundreds and millions of dollars, if not more. Um, set it and forget it. And air fryers now are a big deal. And there's always something to put on there, even if it's a 60-second one, with like the hose that never tangles. Um, and there's a lot of money to be made. Interesting point. Whatever they're charging for it, divide by five, and that's how much it costs to bake it.
I believe that.
So if they're
I believe
charging
that.
$20, it costs them $4 to make.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. That is kind of jarring sometimes, even when I watch Shark Tank. You're referring to to Lori Grineer, she who does all the HSN stuff, or infomercial
Yeah, that's
stuff,
what I was
and
talking about.
yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting because they'll ask them just like straight up sometimes during Shark Tank pitches, what do you make it for and what do you sell it for? And sometimes they're like, make it for 10 cents, sell it for $20, and you're just like, what? Like how does that work? But like they have good products that people want, so people are willing to pay for them. Did you have a
Well,
did you Oh, sorry, go ahead.
if that's something people are interested in, the little inside baseball on the infomercial and home shopping world, we do do a whole chapter on my business and a couple chapters on my business and that in detail. So something that you might find that's not wrestling related, but might find interesting.
One quick follow-up about the tattoo airbrush. Did you have like any like designs that people really like took to more than others or anything? I For whatever reason I'm just envisioning like the Goldberg tribal tattoo because I'm just like connecting you to WCW, and like I feel like every little kid back in the 90s wanted that. Did you have any kind of best options like when you guys had that together that people really kind of took to?
We did. There was women like this butterfly design that we had, and we had like tons of designs. And without getting into the whole business, you could read about that in the book, and it's pretty interesting how it came about because it kind of came about out of nowhere. And but I was able to partner up with a guy in Melbourne and Brisbane, Australia, who created a program where he could make a stencil for an airbrush tattoo of anything, any character. So for example, to bring this back around to wrestling, for 3 or 4 years during the Road to WrestleMania tour, we did WWF WWE tattoos. So the Undertaker character at the time, whatever the video wall looked like, or the merchandise looked like, we would create those characters, those images, and people could get them. Now they gave them away for free as part of the Road to WrestleMania tour, so they paid us flat amount for our services and for reorders and stuff like that. But it could have gone a lot of ways with we did. We did great. One of the talking about Jimmy Hart. Jimmy brought us. He knew the guy from Graceland, and me and Jimmy and my partner Marty Thompson, also from Australia, drove to Memphis, and we set it up in Graceland for a test run. And I mean, they couldn't get enough of the Elvis Presley tattoos. You had the TCB with the lightning bolt. You had Elvis's face, and just Graceland. The gates of Graceland, and they ended up doing a licensing deal with us for about 5 years. So yeah, it was at the time it was very popular. We were building it very quickly, and then the long story short, the housing market tanked, and then the financial market tanked in 2008, 2009, when they were basically giving out mortgages to people's dogs. Uh, uh, so uh, without we talk about it there, but without getting into detail, that affected the business in a negative way. But yeah, we were on 35, 40 cruise ships at one point.
The cruise business is fascinating to me. We don't have to get into all of that, but that is
Well,
very
I can tell you a lot some other time about the cruise business because not only did I work on a cruise ship where I actually met my wife who was also working on a cruise ship, but my brother is very high level up. Well, he was. He's not anymore in the cruise ship business, and by getting us on cruise ships, we learned a lot about the inside baseball. So, you ever want to have a conversation sometime? Uh, uh, we could follow that up because it's an interesting business for sure.
we have someone on staff who he's a musician and he played on cruise ships and he has some stories that again it's wild to me and I've seen I've actually seen documentaries of stuff when it comes to cruise ships and yeah the stuff they are able to pull off and the way they are able to pull it off on cruise ships is very fascinating.
Well,
What
it's totally changed. Back in the day, 40 years ago, they encouraged the male staff to try to hit on the female passenger women, and because they thought that that would give them a good experience. But obviously, you can't, you certainly can't do that in 2024, let alone 2020. But this is the 1980s, and things were different, and so it got pretty wild back in the day, but that stuff has been gone for a while now, and everybody got to stay in their own lane and not you know be in a social situation with passengers and vice versa.
Oh, it's complete carny for the lack of a
Yeah.
better term
Oh,
out there.
100%.
So yeah. As we start to wind down here, David, I know we have a lot to cover, but we have kind of limited time on here. I do want to ask because I don't know if you saw this news about Jade Chung. She is leaving Impact at the end of the year, and so I feel like natural question: is there any interest in return from you?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I talk about my reaction in the book, to when I stopped doing it, and I don't want to give away the story, but uh on one level the travel was just really tough at the end. And but I love being there and doing my job and hanging out with the guys, before the show and after the show, having a cocktail or two. Uh, uh, but I don't know. It would be hard to say no. The good news is I don't think they're going to call me. So I mean, I don't think they will. They went younger and prettier for a reason. And when I say prettier, I don't mean just a woman. There are probably a lot of prettier men out there that younger and prettier men than myself at the moment. But I don't know. I mean, anything could happen. So it would be hard to say no, but my guess my heart would say yes, and my brain would say, yeah, it's about, what, you're done. So I don't know. But again, let me say that I don't expect to be called. I'm not calling anybody to fetch for jobs. So, if they reach out to me, we'll see what happens.
In your opinion, Dave, what makes a good ring announcer? Like, what are some things that you try to keep in mind to be as good as you were throughout your career?
Well, I talk about that in the book when I was training Jade, because I knew about 6 months before my time was over that I was going to be handing the microphone to Jade. So I went all in on passing the mic, so to speak, and teaching her. And um, there's a couple things that are more difficult than you would think. Having to announce to the crowd while they're talking to you in the truck in your ear takes some getting used to. If I could speak for Jade, that was one of the things she felt she had a harder time adjusting to. Um, but my thing was always I'm not there to be a star. I'm there to host an event, whether it's a television taping or a pay-per-view or a house show. I'm there to host an event. I'm your host. I want you to have as much fun as you can. I want you to be as lively as you can for TV. I want you to, I want to keep you, updated with what's coming still to come. So, because sometimes these shows get long, and I'm there for the fans, and everything else is just, if my voice is on, if I'm in the ring, if whatever it is, it's just gravy. My job is to be there for the fans.
Who are some of your favorite ring announcers, like whether they're like all time or people currently that you see?
I'll tell you, I mean, Howard Finkel is the absolute best ever. There's nobody close. No disrespect to anybody else. There's like Howard, and then there's like, the second and third and fourth places are way down the pike. Um, I used to watch Madison Square Garden shows on the MSG network at the beginning of cable television. And the best part, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and they agree with me. The best part of the show is before the last match, which wasn't the main event, by the way. Back in those days, the main event went on before intermission. But before the last match, which is usually some kind of Andre feature or 10-man tag team match, something that would get people to stay till the end and pique their interest. But uh, Howard Finkel would run down the show for next month at Madison Square Garden. I mean, the entire show, like, 9, 10 matches. And, the way he would build it and the way, he would get, he'd start, ladies and gentlemen, SD Jones takes on Rene Goulet, but that's not all. And then he'd build it up and he'd crescendo it at the end. So even if it sucked, you went like, oh my God, that's great. And then you realized it sucked like 2 minutes later. Like one time we go, and ladies and gentlemen, WWF champion Bob Backlund will defend his title next month in Madison Square Garden against Alpha the Samoan. And you'd be like, oh my God, that's great. Just because how he did it. And then you think about it and you'd be like, no, that's kind of nothing against Alpha the Samoan, but he was in a tag team. So he's not winning the world title at Madison Square Garden. So, uh, but he was so good at that he could get you every time. And I mean, that's still to this day, if I could ever find that on video, that's must-watch television. He was just so good at it. So I think Samantha Irving was on this something very special. She put an emotion into it that I've never seen before. I had reached out to her and we had a couple of chats on Twitter, and that actually sent her a book. Um, she was onto something very special that I don't know could be replicated. But she chose to go a different path, and that's not everybody wants to grow up and be a Hall of Fame ring announcer, or a famous ring announcer. From what I understand, she's a performer and has a great voice, and so sometimes people, that's their ultimate goal. As my ultimate goal, and not to be a Hall of Fame because that's not going to happen, but to be, make a living and be able to live my dream as a professional ring announcer on a high level. But others is a means to an end. If she could take that notoriety and use it to become to sign a record deal or a Broadway show or whatever, God bless her.
David, we want to thank you for joining us here tonight. Let everybody know where they can get the book at Sitting Ringside Volume 2, and let everybody know where they can follow you at.
Well, you can still get the first one if you haven't. And just FYI, there's a ton of extra content in there, bonus content. There's the XWF Business Plan that I don't even know how I got. But very few people have seen it. And it goes into dollars and cents and talent pay and office pay and production pay. And if you ever wanted to see how you put together a business plan to start a wrestling company, we got that for you. That's included in the book. We got the Flair's last match entire format that I don't think's ever been released. A bunch of a bunch of TNA formats. We got the format from Impact when Kenny Omega took on Rich Swann in that big match to combine the titles. So a ton of great content. And they go to davidpenzerbook.com, all one word. Lots of cool bundles and stuff that you could get extra stuff to get signed at conventions and trade shows and wrestling events. And then you could also just go to amazon.com and check it out. Gotten great reviews, initial reviews, and this will 99.9% be the last one. So if you have any interest, be sure to pick it up. And like I said, both of these books are inside baseball on the wrestling business. The things that you always wanted to know, the formats you always wanted to see but never did. And so that's what we provide, along with a little of my insight and my story.
Folks, again, the link is davidpenzerbook.com. You can also go to Amazon. I believe also GuyEvansBook.com will get you
it's
there.
It's GuyEvansBooks.com.
Okay, so you have
David
book,
Penzer book.
He has books.
And then Guy Evans Books.
There you go. Guy Evans Books, David Penzer Book. davidpenzer.com. Also Amazon. You can follow David on Twitter at David Penzer if you'd like to do that. Keep up with him. Again, we really appreciate you joining us. The links are below, everybody, so you could just click the link. That'll get you directly there. David, thank you again for joining us tonight.
Hey, you guys are blessed. Anytime you want me to come on and tell stories, I'm happy to fill some time for you. And tell Sean Ross Sapp that as bad as my connection was, his was worse.
Okay, well, do.
And he runs the show. So what's up with that?
Allegedly. Yeah, he kind of lets us do what we want sometimes.
The face of the franchise?
Yeah, he is. What can you do? Anything I do wrong, he gets blamed. Sean does. So I use that to my advantage. David, thank you again for joining us here tonight. Guys, we'll be right back here on the Spotlight.